Hey everyone, welcome to the Growin Up Podcast. We're your hosts. My name is Amber,
And my name's Nevaeh.
and we are excited to bring you guys episode 1. It's the
Er,
first
er,
official
er.
episode. We got a lot of good feedback on our introduction episode 0 video, so it kind of got us pumped up, got us motivated and excited to actually get this going, and happy that you guys had some positive feedback on that.
Yeah, I feel like we got a lot of comments in that, oh, it's about time. Or I don't know. I just feel like they envisioned it for us. So love that.
True. We also got a message from our grandma, our soul, and she said that she listened to it, and we were very surprised that she had listened to us.
Yeah, yeah. Shout out to you, Soul. Shout out to you.
Yeah,
I'm glad that hopefully I feel like the goal is for this podcast is that it's fitting to all generations because I feel like even though it's being it's called growing up and like we had mentioned in our first episode, like there's always room for growing and it doesn't really stop with age. So
true.
I'm happy hopefully we can, recruit some older individuals.
Yeah. Well, since we released the first episode, episode 0, what have you been up to lately?
Mainly just school. I'm on winter break now, so that's a huge plus. Obviously, probably gonna do a lot of work on my thesis, but took comps, graded my students. Interesting time for undergrads. It's weird being on the flip side now, like being the teacher and being the one to have to lay down the rules. So that's a huge difference. But it's been good. I'm glad to be able to be on break now and spend some time regathering myself because let me tell
Yeah.
you, I definitely need it.
Yeah.
How about you?
And and no, but for those who don't know, she's a what would you call you? A
I'm
professor?
a teaching assistant.
A
So, our
teaching
program, you have
assistant.
to teach classes to help you pay for your school. And I teach things called outfits, which I
It's
work with
PE.
undergrad students. Yeah, I'm basically like a glorified PE teacher for undergrads. But I like it. I feel like it's a different way to connect with students. I feel like I wouldn't have gotten the same experience if I were like teaching like X Phys or anatomy and phys or something like that. So I definitely like the vibes. It's been a learning experience for myself.
Yeah.
But it's been a vibe. It's been a vibe.
Nice. Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I hear a lot of her stories about just like the students at her school, and some of them are funny. Reminds
Yeah.
me back of when I went was an undergrad, like right out of high school.
Oh
Good
yeah.
times. But me recently, just working. Actually not really. The past week, my friend Nevaeh came to visit from Arizona, so took a couple days off last week, hung out with him over the weekend, went on some crazy adventures, did some sightseeing and some touristy things around Denver. Good times. Um,
I was just going to say another thing that we've been up to is our mentoring. Me and Amber do mentoring through the Boys and Girls Club. So we're basically virtual mentors to a bunch of Native students at different dorms throughout Northern Arizona. So that's kind of what we've been doing on our off time. It's been a joy.
Yeah, I think it's also important to mention too that the students that we're mentoring are high schoolers, so freshman through senior, ages like what would you say, like 13 through 18. It was crazy how we kind of got into this, and to be honest, it was a kind of like a battle for me because time commitment. It's a lot more time than I was thinking that I was going to have to commit, but it's definitely been something that's been fulfilling for me. And I've been glad that I've been able to connect with Native students back near where I grew up, in the Flagstaff, Northern Arizona area. So it's been really nice and uplifting for sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think being in this position, obviously I've always looked for opportunities to mentor, whether that not be officially through a mentoring program, but reaching out to friends and family who I know are about to enter the world of who knows what. So it's cool to be able to kind of have that same relationship but not obviously have the ties of it being a family. So it's definitely been fun. I think that these kids you know, make us feel young again.
Well,
So it's been cool.
yeah. I think also too, like, getting to know a lot of the other mentors has really, opened up, like, my network, but just to, like, get to meet people who are like-minded like us. All the mentors that we're, alongside, I've never met before and never crossed paths with them, and it's awesome to see what they're doing and all of their successes and how they're, in the same situation as us wanting to help, these high schoolers.
Yeah, which brings us into today's topic. So,
Yeah.
we got a lot of stuff kind of like laid out, and hopefully we'll have a good conversation about it. So we're glad that y'all have joined us.
Yeah, and, with that, so based off of this mentoring, it's obviously had us thinking a lot about, the things that these kids, they ask us questions and they ask for some advice and stuff, and, today's episode, we're gonna talk about the things that we wish that we had learned sooner. So I'm sure that many of you guys have all gotten to a point in life where you're like, you learn something and you're like, "This would have been so much better if I learned this, like, 5 years ago or something."
Yeah, and it's also like that question in your head is like, why didn't they teach us this in high school? Like why didn't they prepare us for the world? So like that's the biggest thing too I found myself saying as I went through undergrad and even like now, and I'm sure I'm gonna have 10 times more questions in like the next year. So
Yeah, and to be very transparent, like, some of these things we've literally just learned within, like, maybe even yesterday, like, we're still learning. It's funny because as we were going through the list, I'm like, taxes, I still don't understand them 100%, but it's like, I'm getting there, and, I know a lot more than I did back when I should have, but,
yeah,
yeah,
the actual first class I had that actually covered like a lot of like really relatable content that I feel like is actually valuable and applies to me as an adult was literally this year in my grad program. And I feel like I learned so much in that class about savings and how to apply to jobs and really perfecting my resume and interview skills and things that I don't think I would have gotten if I obviously didn't have access to that. So
yeah.
yeah.
I actually that reminds me, one time unfortunately, I had to take a class because I was failing other classes, and in that class, I learned so much more about things that, like, I wish I would have known, and it's like, those things should be more standardized and, like, everyone should take those before, it's a consequence of not doing something else. Um, but but yeah. So we're going to go into the first topic, and the first one on our list is developing financial literacy. And I could do a whole episode on this one because I love this topic, but this is what we're going to start with.
Heavy load there.
Heavy load. And no, but I think this is the important one because, like, you need to have money, unfortunately, to navigate through the world, like,
Yeah.
if you need gas to get somewhere, if you wanna buy food to eat, like, it all goes around finances, and it can be super hard to navigate, and I'm still learning how to navigate it. But just learning about, like, budgeting and saving and managing that money, that's the hard part, and for me, personally, I went to a lot of books, like, I read so many books and watched so many YouTube videos on, like, people who study or, like, are enthusiasts in the field, and that's how I got a lot of my, financial, like, knowledge.
Yeah, the book that you gave me, like, I fixed, like, my credit in, like, a week from reading it, and so, yeah, I guess those are, like even though they're kinda boring at first, like, they're kinda hard to get into, but once you get back into it, like, some of them are really well written because they're reflective on their own life, and I feel like that's the best way of learning is being able to hear other people's examples,
Yeah.
and, that takes a lot of vulnerability to put your finance stuff out there, so, applaud to those
Ye
authors.
Yeah, actually, when my friend was here this weekend, I was telling him, I was like, "You know, financial, like, literature, like, books can be boring, but I think there's like you said, like a realm of different types of books. You can have ones that are like, you do step by step by step to get here, or there are some are more on like the psychology of money, which is actually a book I'm reading right now, plug that. Or you can like have ones that are about their story and how they got there. So no matter like what kind of books you're interested in, I'm sure you could find one that would be suited to you and something that you'd be interested in. um, but yeah, books. I think books are really good, and there are a lot of good YouTubers out there that
That's true.
I listen in on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Podcasts too. There's podcasts out there.
True. There are podcasts. I listen to a couple, like How to Finance. I think that's one of the podcasts I listen to. Super good. And they just take up, like 45 minutes of your day and you walk away with a little bit more knowledge. So, um, I think also with this too, on the topic, I know we have a younger brother and he's in high school right now. And one thing that came up into my mind was how to open, a bank account, because that's something that most people don't really go over before you gotta go out into the world. You are so like used to cash, and I remember I used to babysit and make cash. So like, I never really had like a bank account until I was at the end of my high school. But getting that is, and knowing how to get that is a good thing that we should know.
Yeah, nowadays they don't pay in checks. Like I feel like majority of places like I'll pay like direct deposit. So if you want your money, you're gonna need a bank account. Let me tell you.
True. I remember when I used to have to go get a money order to pay my rent.
Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, and I had to, like, go over to the gas station, get a money order, and then give it to the office on the 1st. But yeah.
That's
Um,
crazy. That's
yeah,
crazy.
hidden memory there. But also with, like, bank accounts, there are debit cards and there are credit cards. I think that's one thing that it should also be known is, like, the difference between a debit account and a credit account, and just how they differ and how each one can help you as you start to build your, like, good finances and your good financial habits.
Yeah, I feel like credit cards, like I've come into the conversation with multiple of people where they are having trouble because they don't have any credit and now they're like in their late 20s, or they are like had heard nothing but negative connotations like about credit cards from either like older parents, people with bad experiences. And I feel like credit scores, like, yes, like obviously credit's like negative connotation, don't have a bad credit score, you can't get anything. But I feel like there needs to be a change in the frame of it. I feel like, looking at the benefits of it and the best ways to manage your credit card before you get into so much problems.
Yeah, credit is a hard one. I think this is also like something like if you want to know about it, you really have to dig deep to learn a lot about it. And I think kind of like what you said, like there should be just more simple explanations of what credit is and how is ran. Like you can search it online and there are so many different like versions of it. But I think that if there was a simple how-to guide, that would be nice with credit. But my biggest, like, insight on that is to start early. But before you start early, definitely, like, make sure that you're ready for it and that you understand it. So I would say do research, then start. But the earlier you start and the better you manage it, like, the better your credit score will be in the end. And then we had taxes on the list, but you can go and learn about that. Just remember, like taxes are important, um, and that eventually you're gonna have to file them.
Yeah,
We
they'll
have a
find
little bit
you.
of a true. We have a little bit of a insight on that because our mom does taxes, but um, that's our one, our one, I guess, privilege, or I guess at least how we learn. Because
Yeah.
nowadays, like, I'm, like, always thinking about my taxes if I, like, go to the hospital or, like, get some kinda healthcare done, I'm like, "I gotta save this receipt for my taxes."
Yeah, for sure. I think that like taxes is just something everybody's gonna like learn on. Unless you do taxes yourself, like I feel like there's always a new document every single year. Or like
True.
there's document for this, and they're all called like similar names, so you can never really figure out which one's which.
Yeah, and also one thing too, like, I remember when I was general manager at Jimmy John's, and so as a general manager, you kinda had to do, like, all aspects of, like, hiring, and I hired this kid, and I sat him down, and I, like, gave him the tax papers, and he's like, "I don't know how to fill this out." And I was like, "Oh, well, I don't either." So that was like my first insight where I was like, "Okay, maybe I should learn how to fill these out," because I learned that I have to help other people fill it out if they don't know. But I remember at the time I was just like, "Take it home, ask your mom, and then we'll get back together." But
Yeah, no,
yeah,
that's
so it's super
crazy.
important. to know like W-2s and W-4s and stuff like that before you get a job or go look for a job because you're going to need to fill that out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I called mom from like the office of somewhere, like, Mom, what do I put on this? They're asking me. And she, yeah, bad experience. Bad experience.
True. Go ahead. Take us into the next.
Awesome. This is more my jam. See, the thing between me and Amber is Amber's just like I understand finance, but the only reason why I understand finance is because of Amber. So I feel like if I, it's a hard concept to like want to get into, but it's also like a needed content to get into. And so, thank you, Amber. Praise to you. I'm all Gucci. I'm all Gucci. So the next thing we're gonna really cover is exploring career options. So really trying to decide what kind of options you have out there after graduating high school, or even looking at what career options you have while you're in high school as well. If that's something, we have our young workers who do it out of one, the need to do it, but also the love of just being involved and being working. So um I would say biggest thing, definitely do your research. I feel like, as you go further into education, your career, it's always just important to know what it is that you're going into, knowing how it works, how, especially like the people involved in the career. I feel like networking is the biggest thing. So you can even start that before you have a career. Um,
True.
Looking for opportunities to shadow, to really look at if that opportunity is for you. I actually had high school students today in our lab doing some tours, and they came with their sports medicine group, and a lot of them were like, what's an exercise physiologist? And we like obviously told them what an exercise physiologist is. And they like, one of the girls, I was like, you guys should like take the opportunity to shadow. And not a lot of people know what shadowing means and what
Yep.
it entails, but shadowing basically is just following somebody around their job. So the most like oldest concept I have of shadowing is when you had like your friend and they would come shadow you at school. Yeah, do you remember that, like when people did that?
No. Like a
Really?
young person, like in middle school?
Yeah, like if somebody was interested like in their kid going to school there, their kid could shadow another class, like
Oh, yeah, I
person
think
in
I
the class.
shadowed, Jerry one time.
Yeah, yeah, probably. So,
Yeah.
I don't know, I just feel like that concept kind of went away, obviously, probably after, like, COVID. I know, like, I tried to shadow a doctor once, and he was like, "Sorry, like, COVID restrictions."
Oh, yeah.
But definitely looking for those opportunities and, taking that extra step to really explore your options. There's so many roads to go down, and I feel like I don't even know half of them still within my own field even.
Yeah. Yeah, I think also part of that too, like you said, is just networking. So just getting out there and finding new experiences that you could be a part of. I remember back when I used to work at Jimmy John's, like a lot of the people who come in, everybody's got to eat, right? So there's like so many variety of people that come in, and if somebody looked like they were looking for someone to talk to, or they were waiting for their food, I'd ask them like, "Hey, so like, what do you do?" And just opening up that door to like hear about what other people do might actually interest you. And like you said, you could be like, oh, what is that? Like, I never even heard of that before. And still to this day, like, I run into people and I have no idea, like, or I didn't even think that what they're doing is a job, or that people are out there doing that. But I think also like part of that is that you, as you do these experiences and as you find like even just an entry level part-time job, you get to identify what your interests are and your strengths. I think that was one big thing for me, was when I realized, like when I was in my first like fast food job, I was like, okay, I'm good at leading, like I'm good at time management. And so that's kind of what got me into like business management originally, was just like that idea that I knew what I was good at, and I knew that I was actually interested in the field just based off of experience and getting to dabble in it. Yeah, that helps choose a career path. And I think part of that also too is just like understanding if you actually want to go to college right after high school. I think that's something that a lot of people tend to ignore, and they think that going to college right after high school is the best thing for them. And to be completely honest, it's not for everyone. Like
Mhm.
there are other unconventional paths to a successful career, and it doesn't always include going straight off to college, you know.
Yeah. And big hint, guys, you can go to college undeclared. Like, if you don't know what it is that you want to do in college, but you know you want to go to college, you can go undeclared and take the time to really figure it out. There's now, I feel like majority of universities have opportunities for you to do that and go into those next steps of figuring out what it is that you like. It's just a matter of fact of looking for those options. So career readiness service. And I know like each department has their own outreach program. They now encourage like students to reach out to like advisors and meet with them before they join the program. So like
Yeah.
Amber said, like definitely taking that time to network and find opportunities to better understand, your own skills and your interests. I feel like you touched on, skills is a huge part. Like that'll really tell you, where you fit in things. I know like there's like what are it called? Like the career quizzes. I did like 10 of those in my lifetime, and they're not the best because they don't have every single career. However, but they give you an idea of like the field of like where you see yourself in a position. So, you know,
Yeah. I think one thing though with those two is like you kind of have to be very honest with yourself, because I remember like there would be questions and I would try to like lean myself into the healthcare field, but really I probably should have like been more honest with myself and opened like clicked on the answers that actually applied, not what I wanted.
that's true. That's true. Like the last one I took told me I would be a podiatrist, and I was like, you know what? Close enough.
You're like, I like feet.
Nice.
Is
The
that what a
bones are a
podiatrist
part
is?
of the feet. What?
Oh. That a podiatrist is the feet, right?
Yes, they are. And I've also heard of like many people like go into like say, "Oh, I want to be a podiatrist," and then find out that like podiatrists like actually just clean toenails
That's
and
feet.
cut toenails all the time. And like that's really like, like that's really what the purpose is, cuz like, you could have went into podiatry and then ended up clipping toenails for diabetic patients. And some people like that, some people don't, but like I've like literally taking that from the story of one of my professors, and now he's a researcher and not
True.
working with feet or toenails.
True. And if you want to cut toenails for a career, I'm all for it too.
Oh yeah, there's a need for it. There's a need for it
True.
for sure.
I guess that also brings up too, like, you don't have to go to conventional, like, universities, like, you can start off at a community college, you can go to vocational, like, training. I remember when I was in high school, I was into this music making era, and I wanted to go off to, like, to go do sound engineering at, I forgot what the place was called, but, there are all different types of, like, schooling, in a sense, education, or just learning that you can sign up. I mean, you can take a course on Coursera right after high school and like
Mhm.
learn about what you want that way. If you want to get into computer programming, like buy a course online and go through that course. And there are other forms of education that is not just going to a university.
Yeah. Certificates are a big thing nowadays. Like getting a certificate's a lot less school. It's not as like demanding, I guess, as like a full course load. But you're
Yeah.
still end to end becoming certified in something. And that adds to the resume. Apprenticeships. I learned this from my mentee the other day when he was talking about welding. And, obviously welding, like my dad welds, but obviously I don't weld. So like that was a huge like insight for me too, doing research on like the amount of opportunities you have without going to higher education. I did do that traditional go to college, step
Mhm.
routine. And it's just really interesting to see like, now I hear people and their stories, and it's never a straight road for most people. It's usually a up, around the right, turn around, back up. Like
Sure.
it's not a straight road for everyone. So definitely, as you're
Mm.
exploring career options, take it as you please, and whatever you're doing doesn't have to match the other person next to you.
Yeah, and also with that, like, even if you go to school for something, like, you can end up something completely different. Like, in my case, I did my undergrad in business management, and now I'm, like, a programmer, like, in software engineer. So, I did not learn anything that I'm doing now in school, but, I got the degree, and then I taught myself a new skill, and I took it in that direction. So, you're not tied down by what your degree is, that's for sure.
Yeah, I have when I did like med school programs, there was like medical students who have business degrees or had like a graphic design degree, but like there's ways around it, you know. It's
Mhm.
never too late to change your mind.
True. But with that being said, make sure you research your institutes, get to do thorough research before you do that, and then make sure you know that what you're getting into. So if that's like, there are different like things like loans and legal, like maybe you have to sign a contract or something like that. Just know what you're getting into before you make any like signs or commit to anything. Yeah. So that goes, I guess the next one is one thing that I wish I would have learned sooner is how to set clear goals. And it sounds a little cliche, but no one ever really sat down with me and was like, okay, let's write a list of goals that you can work toward. Being able to determine what you want to achieve in the next, like in short term and in long term, and you decide what that is. But um being able to like set clear goals. I know that people talk a lot about smart goals. I'm a firm believer of them. Make sure that you're being specific, make sure that they're very attainable. I think those are the very important things in that. But you can set goals for all aspects of your life.
Yeah, I feel like what Amber said, like double take, like make sure they're attainable. I feel like that's like the part that is the hardest is like saying you want to do something, but one, not having the appropriate steps on how to get to that point, but also like ensuring that you're giving yourself enough time and energy to do so. I feel like, going pre med in undergrad, I mean, I still have big hopes and dreams and goals, but I feel like throughout my undergrad, I had, goals that of already wanting to be a doctor, but I wasn't really looking back at the steps that needed to get there. And now I
Yeah.
feel like I have myself trying to catch up on those steps. And I feel like obviously maybe it would have been different if I had like a clear set way to get to that big goal. And
Mhm.
I feel like that's super important is to really ensure you're really looking at each step of the way and building up to that. I mean, there's you can have goals within side of goals, and I think
Yeah.
that that's the best way to look at it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good one, is that breaking up the bigger goal into smaller steps so that you can actually measure it. That's where the measure part comes in. um, I remember one time, I don't know, I was watching a YouTube video or something, but it was just saying that like it's very demotivating when you have a goal so far out, but you're not measuring your success. So being able to set smaller goals that get you toward there so that it's like a pat on the back to yourself so that you know that you're making that progress, which is actually more motivational for you to help reach those goals and get to where you want to be. I know like one thing that I like to tell people is like making your bed in the morning as the first thing, because that's like it helps with the motivation. So you start off with making your bed, you feel again that pat on the back for yourself. You're like, okay, it's a good day. Let's start this. Now on to the next thing. What's the next thing that I got to accomplish today to kind of keep that motivation up and that morale going for yourself so that, you don't end up in those slumps very often. Not to say that those don't happen because I fall into those all the time, but, something as simple as making your bed every morning can help you be motivated.
Yeah. I think also practicing self-discipline, I've heard that like that goes hand in hand with like being motivated. I think that's something I still struggle with to this day, but it's an important skill to have. And I feel like it'll benefit you in the most outrageous ways. Like even if it is fixing your bed in the morning, like being able to have that self-discipline, one, to get out of bed, but two,
Right.
to like, you know, get the energy to, do something right off the bat. It's all
Hmm.
about self-discipline. And that's also related to like a lot of like health and fitness goals. Like
True.
psychologically, like you really want to achieve those goals by having self-discipline behind you as well as motivation. So
Um, but I think also like in the whole goal setting aspect, like I said, you can set goals for anywhere in your life. And I was telling Navi this, but like I have, personal goals that include like everything that I want to achieve. I have relationship goals, I have career goals that I do for work, I have financial goals. So you can really like, I even have goals set out for my truck. Like like I set my little list of things that I want to do eventually or what I need to do. And then that's something that I work toward and something that I care about. So also write down the goals, write them down. I write them down like in a journal. I wrote them down on Notion. I have them down on my like app on my phone. Writing down the goals is really important.
Yeah, or if you're a visual person, I've seen people make like the boards, like the vision boards. Even though like obviously you should probably like do some background behind why you want those on your board, but like it's a good way to one remind yourself of what you're working towards. I have
Yeah.
a friend who she just started like incorporating vision boards and she's like I've accomplished like majority of it on my screen. And just,
Mhm.
there's ways to write goals, different ways. So find whatever works best for you,
True.
and kind of determine how that works for you, the way you write it. Even like sometimes I'm still trying to figure out what's the best way to write it down. So again, progress in myself, but there's many ways to lay out those goals.
But once I figured out like goal setting, like it really changed my perspective in life and in years and, just in time. I think that's really what it is too, is like when I understood what it was like to achieve a goal, more importantly, like writing them down is one thing, but actually achieving them, it made me so like proud of myself. And it again, it goes back to that motivation and that morale. So, um, definitely goal setting. That's one thing that I wish I would have learned sooner.
Yeah, yeah.
And the next one is developing skills. So we kind of broke these up into two skills. First one is soft skills, which really focus on like interpersonal relationships um and then there's like life skills, which is things like cleaning and how to I guess cook and you maybe even get an apartment, I consider that a life skill.
Hmm.
Um
Yeah, obviously I know I'm still growing in both my life skills and soft skills, but I think that with life skills, like, leaving the nest as early as I did, it was a lot. Like, especially because my undergrad, so we didn't have a dining hall. We had gotten our own apartment, our own kitchen, a refrigerator, a washing machine. Like we basically were given an apartment. And yes,
yeah.
like that was very nice, like being able to have like my own shower, my own it had its benefits. But let me tell you, like it got so hard to the point where like I was expected to be able to feed myself every single day. Like that concept without like, like going to somewhere and like getting it and like it was just a lot thrown at me. And I feel like, that changes things. And I feel like, that obviously I probably wouldn't have learned to do all that if I wasn't put in that same situation. And, having a good like nutritional diet is important. And, that's like a skill within its skill, so
Yeah.
like there's just so much to build on here. But like I've noticed that like from being able to like maintain a household has made my life so much easier.
Yeah.
Being able to spend more time on myself, if that makes sense. So like being able to, do those without thinking about it and then fitting it into my
Yeah.
lifestyle gives me a lot more room to really figure out those soft skills. So I feel like they kind of go one in one. Like time management is
Yeah.
another soft skill that's super important, but knowing how to do those life skills within your normal life and then on top of everything that you might have going on, like they all go hand in hand. And I think each one is important in its own way. And like I said, I'm still working on it to this day. Like I don't want to cook some days. I literally like cleaned my bathtub this morning and I was like, dang, like this needed to be done.
True. And also, I think one thing too that is like when you leave the nest after you like go off on your own, there's gonna be no one there but yourself to advocate for yourself. Um, I think I always remember one time I went to go fly somewhere, and it was my first time flying, and I was going alone. And one of my friends had told me before I left, she was like, the most growth I've ever had was the first time I traveled alone. And she like said that to me before I left, but it wasn't until I actually went on my own and went on this flight and went out of state. Um, is when I learned, like, I have to know how to ask for help. I have to know how to like ask for directions. And I had to get out. I remember I got off in the middle of nowhere and I didn't even know how to get a taxi or like I'm not sure if Uber was a thing. I'm sure it was back then, but like I didn't know how to do that. And I was in the middle of nowhere. I had no idea where I was. I had no idea where my hotel was. So like being able to navigate that on your own is like important, and you don't realize like that you don't know how to do that until you're like in the middle of it. And thankfully I got there, and it was it was a great time. But you know I just had to learn how to speak up, really, is what I learned there. And with that too, I think relationship management is super critical because in high school, you have friends, and maybe we're still friends with some of those friends, but like as you go out into the world, not every relationship and every friendship is going to be the greatest, and it takes a lot of maturity to be able to have difficult conversations with people and be able to like navigate that. So I think that that's a super important one, and just communication skills in general is critical, that you pick up and you learn. And one thing that I always say too is like those difficult conversations will never get easier, but the more you do it, the more, I guess, comfortable you come with them. I still have some difficult conversations to this day, and they go a lot better, and you learn the skills to navigate it. But those are just things that are going to be inevitable as you go on through life.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, like, communication skills are super important. Like, even like you had kind of mentioned, like asking for help or just being like able to approach somebody and have a conversation with them and, reflect what it is that you need help with. Like, even if that's ordering your food. And I remember our director was mentioning that like that's the hardest thing that people have trouble doing, like especially high school students, our specifically our high school students, but they have difficulty ordering food. And like even now, like sometimes I find myself or my fiance like having trouble ordering food. And that all goes back down to like just trying to get across what it is that you need. And then also like considering like the way you structure it, because I didn't notice how beneficial structuring a food order is. Like, you order something and then you say something out of order and then you get it and you're like, well, I did say like not the correct way. So like
Mhm.
just things like
Yeah,
that, like just being able to
that's very true.
articulate what it is that you need and want or need
Mhm.
help with is super
Yeah.
important.
I think also just one thing randomly that came up was I think of like storytelling. I think that's an important like skill that people should learn. Multiple reasons we could go into storytelling, but the better you get at, I guess, that aspect is like you get to learn how to get a point across. And I think that's just a super valuable skill and will help you in many, many different areas of life, like interviews or even just like public speaking and stuff like that. So storytelling is one that was engraved in me to kind of like learn and improve the skill.
Yeah, I
But
think even just like showcase on like who we are, like, natives are really good storytellers.
ooh,
And I feel like that has a lot to do with like, the way that we talk about things. So definitely pick up on those things that are ingrained in you, through your family. Some people's families are really good at having conversations. So like really find out what it is that you've been around and emphasize it.
I think that makes me think of also when I was a general manager. I remember when I started interviewing people, the very first question I would ask them is like, "Tell me a bit about yourself." And I'm sure a lot of you have gone into interviews, and that's the first question they ask you. But one time I was like sitting down and I was thinking with myself, like, "Okay, tell me about yourself, Amber." And I had no idea how to do this. And just to think that I've been asking all these people for years, like, to tell me about themselves when I couldn't even get like a good answer. And I'm way better at it now, still learning, but I've improved a lot. But just knowing, how to, even just how to speak about yourself, that's a hard question. And I think it's unfair sometimes that interviewees or interviewers ask that. But you know, get that question down because that's going to be useful.
Yeah, no, for sure. I feel like that was exactly like the same question I got in all my interviews. And even my mock interview. And I feel like that's another thing. I feel like being native, we're always emphasized to like, stay humble, be humble. And I feel like that's kind of like the hard part in some things too,
Mhm.
is really trying to figure out how to not necessarily go against, but kind of relearn things that, you weren't necessarily taught, but you were taught otherwise. And, that took me a probably not that long of a time, but obviously it was difficult to be able to, even now, like I kind of hold back sometimes on, being able to, share my opinion. And it all kind of, again, goes back to, how you were raised. And so again, just really identify those places that you need work, and how it can benefit you in the
Yep.
end.
Yep. Yeah, good point. And that brings us right into the last point, which is to stay flexible and adapt. And I think this is exactly kind of what Navi said, but like be open to change and adapt to those challenges that you are facing. And just know that it's always going to be a learning curve. Like I said at the beginning, these are still things we're going about and trying to improve about ourselves and things that we're trying to navigate and learn about every single day. So even if you set those goals, just know that life may change. It's not always going to go as you plan. You may have to change some things around, and just know, like there's no one specific path to get where you want to be. It's always going to be a loop de loop.
It's going to be a left, back around, go straight.
Exactly.
But yeah, no,
Yeah.
I definitely agree. I think that's like what's carried me through my education, is like, being comfortable with being uncomfortable, and really learning how to read the
Yes.
room and kind of set the tone if there's no tone set. So, just trying to figure out where you fit in that equation essentially. I feel like
Yeah.
that's a skill, and also like it'll make things kind of easier for yourself to really carry the conversation and whatnot. But in all, like, that goes hand in hand with really being able to stay healthy and take care of yourself. I feel like, you can't really do any of these things if you're not, prioritizing your health, or whether that be physical or mental. That's in itself a skill and hard to do. And again, I still find myself trying to figure out how to, balance that with my crazy up and down and to the right and back up life.
My crazy life. um, I think also like just don't remember like don't be afraid to ask for help and advice. And like I've had plenty of mentors, but it wasn't until one specific, like my very first mentor came into my life when I realized, like how valuable people can be. And don't be afraid to like ask for help and ask questions and read books. Like there are like other forms like books, YouTubers, just even just searching up on the website on the web, like there are ways that you can seek information, and don't be afraid to do that if you have questions.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's like, again, just kind of reflecting back on like where I'm at in my point of my life. And I feel like something that I recently just learned about myself is, the importance of seeking guidance and help, and like looking at my comms test. Like, I feel like I've learned the most I've ever have in any kind of subject now.
Mhm.
And I feel like a lot of that had to do with me asking for help from my cohort members, my advisor, other faculty members. And I feel like, it's just kind of reflective in the way that like I retained the information. And so I, wish I had learned that sooner, but I'm glad that I learned it before, taking any further steps in my education. But it could be even as simple as just, seeking help on homework. And, maybe
True.
it'll push you across that line to understanding a
Yeah.
concept that may have puzzled you for years and years. And now it all of a
Yeah.
sudden makes sense.
Yeah. I think this is one thing that I wish I would have known when I had my first attempt at college. Like dropping out, when I really think about it, I'm like, wish I would have asked for help. That would have really made a difference between me succeeding when I was going to university versus just like feeling like I was alone and didn't know what to do. But I think that just asking for help is one of the best things you can do for yourself and may actually change, like the outcome of something. So that's one good thing.
Yeah.
Really,
And I
really
see
good
that
advice.
now. I see that now as a teacher. Like, I like always tell my students like I can't help you unless you help me. And I say that like in the
Mhm.
context of like attendance or assignments, like I really can't do anything to better them or help them if, they're not coming to me for help in the first place. So, again, looking on the
Yeah,
other flip side of it, like it you never know what that person's going to think when you're going to approach for help. They could be waiting for this question their entire life.
true. Very true. And with that too, like I think it's also important to know how to ask for help in terms of like careers because like no one as a manager, like I used to think of this, but like no one's gonna know you want to move up or continue on in your career unless you ask for it or like you mention it, you know. So that goes back to that speaking up. It's just like if you're just more vocal, you know, good things may come and you know, the worst thing that can happen is they say no, you know? And, yeah, I mean, that's I say that almost every day. I'm like, "You know, I'm gonna ask. The worst thing they can say is no, but I'm gonna ask."
Yeah, that's so true.
But, yeah, I mean, just remember, I guess, you know, it's a process. It's a learning process, and I feel like in 50 years from now, I'm still gonna have some more list of things that I wish I would have known sooner.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and yeah, I think it's okay to make mistakes. I think that's my biggest takeaways thus far in my like lifetime is that I've made plenty of mistakes where I've been able to learn about them and I've been able to speak on them, you know. And now the best thing that I can do is, you know, help other people who are in those situations. And I guess that's where, you know, you get a little bit wiser with every mistake.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like, these conversations, again, kind of going back to the reason why we, chose our topic for our podcast. And that was really, to have these conversations, where you can ask for help and be able to, be that realm to normalize the idea of making mistakes or, you know, admitting you don't know these skills and stuff like that and just acknowledging that, yeah, hey, I might not know these skills now, but take the information and run with it and, make a change in that.
Yeah, true. Cool. Well, with that being said, I guess that's going to be a wrap for today. Any last words?
Follow us on Instagram. Stay up to date. We'll hopefully have a little bit of a better idea of what our episode plans will look like. But with the holidays coming up, we just wanted to say happy holidays and um,
Happy holidays.
I hope you all get to spend time with your family, friends, your loved ones. And yeah, we'll see y'all next time. And thank you for joining the conversation.
Yeah, thank you.